It's September 18th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dan. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. Starting with President Yoon Suk-yeol's second appearance at the UN General Assembly. The South Korean leader is heading out to New York today to attend the 78th session. He'll push for Busan's World Expo bid and call for a stronger international solidarity against North Korea-Russia military ties. And North Korea's Kim Jong-un is on his way back home after a 6-day visit to Russia. We take a closer look at what Pyongyang and Moscow managed to get out of the trip. South Korea's Gaya tumuli has been named on the UNESCO World Heritage List. There are burial mounds built by the Gaya kingdom between the 1st and 6th centuries. President Yoon Suk-yeol begins his week-long trip to New York City for the UN General Assembly. Ahead of his departure, Yoon again highlighted serious security issues, including North Korea's nuclear program and possible arms collaboration with Russia. Our Oh Soo-young starts us off.
President Yoon Suk-yeol reissued his warning against North Korea and Russia's potential arms cooperation, saying the international community will unite even more tightly against the move. The South Korean leader's remarks were published in an interview with the Associated Press ahead of his visit to New York to attend the United Nations General Assembly. Yoon said that military cooperation between Pyongyang and the Kremlin is illegal and unjust, as it contravenes UN Security Council resolutions and various global sanctions. This came amid concerns that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin last week could lead to a weapons deal between the two sides. The Kim-Putin meeting notably came on the heels of the trilateral Camp David summit between South Korea, the United States and Japan in August. Pointing to Seoul and Washington's pledges this year to expand joint military drills and plan joint responses to nuclear contingencies, Yoon said that the two sides had reaffirmed that any nuclear attack by North Korea will be met with a swift, overwhelming and decisive response that would end the regime. Echoing his words at the East Asia Summit earlier this month, Yoon again stressed that China should play a responsible and constructive role in handling North Korea, as well as addressing other global challenges. He is expected to make a similar call during a speech at the UN General Assembly on Wednesday local time. Yoon said that as South Korea, as a non-permanent member of the Security Council next year, will play a responsible role on pertinent issues, including North Korea's nuclear program and the war in Ukraine. He will also address global gaps in the areas of development, climate response and digital transformation, and lay out South Korea's plan to help resolve such challenges, particularly in tackling the growing digital divide and building new global norms to make digital technology ethical and beneficial for humanity. Yoon will hold a Digital Vision Forum at New York University, expanding on the principles he declared in Paris back in June. Until his 5th and final day in New York City, the South Korean leader will hold at least 30 bilateral meetings on the sidelines in an all-out effort to win support for Busan City's bid to host the 2030 World Expo. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
And over the weekend, top diplomats of the U.S. and China met up in Malta, looking to stabilize the two countries' relations. Their 12-hour-long secret meetup raises the possibility of a summit between Joe Biden and Xi Jinping. Lee Seung-ja has more.
For 12 hours from September 16th to the 17th, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and Chinese Foreign Minister Wang held talks on the Mediterranean island nation of Malta. According to the White House, the meeting came as the two rival countries look to responsibly maintain their relationship at a time of strained ties. In separate statements published by the White House and the Chinese Foreign Ministry on Sunday, the two held candid, substantive, and constructive talks during multiple meetings over the course of the 2 days. The White House said that the two sides discussed key issues in the U.S.-China bilateral relationship, global and regional security issues, Russia's war against Ukraine, and cross-strait issues, among other topics. Beijing, meanwhile, noted that the two sides conducted candid, substantive, and constructive strategic communication, focusing on stabilizing and improving Sino-U.S. relations. Meanwhile, a senior Biden administration official said that there are early signs that Washington and Beijing could resume military communications that have been severed over the past few years. However, Chinese officials did not comment on the issue of military-to-military communications resuming. However, the Chinese Foreign Ministry did say that both parties agreed to maintain high-level exchanges and hold bilateral consultations on Asia-Pacific affairs, maritime affairs, and foreign policy. The latest meeting comes after a number of high-ranking U.S. officials visited Beijing in recent months for talks. U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo, Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, and Biden's climate envoy John Kerry all visited China this year to thaw its bilateral relations. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un wrapped up his 6-day Russia visit on Sunday and is returning home. Despite concerns and warnings from the international community, the leaders of Pyongyang and Moscow showed off their special bond. For more, we're joined by Bruce Klinger this morning. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un said the North and Russia have entered a new era in their relations and are enjoying what he called a golden age. How would you evaluate Kim Jong-un's Russia trip? I mean, how was it meaningful for the two leaders?
I think for the two leaders, it was successful. We've seen that the two countries have resumed stronger relations really since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Both countries are outcasts, are isolated, heavily isolated and sanctioned due to their own actions. But in this way, they're trying to gain military cooperation between both nations. There was no announcement from either leader, but the White House previously said that North Korea may provide significant amounts of artillery, which would enable Russia to continue its operations in Ukraine, and return may gain military technology from Russia for military reconnaissance satellites or nuclear-powered submarines. But we don't know any details yet of whether any of that took place.
Right. Now, not only was there a summit with Vladimir Putin, Kim also inspected Russia's nuclear-capable bombers, missiles, and a warship over the weekend. Does the tour mean he's not too happy about North Korea's naval forces? I mean, maybe it's not strong enough yet?
We've seen a renewed focus by Kim Jong-un himself on North Korea's naval capabilities in recent months. Just in the past month, he's given a number of speeches. North Korea has unveiled a new missile submarine, which perhaps can fire nuclear-tipped missiles. He's also talked about nuclear weapons for the naval forces, and we've seen cruise missiles and submarine-launched ballistic missiles that have been test-fired recently. So there is a new emphasis on North Korea's naval forces to be another part of the nuclear forces. But he would likely want more military technology from Russia to continue to augment and refine North Korea's capabilities. And his visit was really a buffet line of military-related facilities in Russia that he may want to gain technology from.
Right, you mentioned the details of those military cooperation are yet to be disclosed, but how much of Russia's space technology will North Korea actually get? I mean, will the North get it immediately?
Well, North Korea would likely want additional Russian technology. Pyongyang has had two failed launches, or attempted launches of its military reconnaissance satellite. That said, the missile programs, the satellite reconnaissance satellites so far have been largely indigenous, though gaining some technology from various sources. But if he were to be able to get Russian technology, that might enable him to make great leaps and bounds in the greater capabilities for not only a military reconnaissance satellite, but also his missiles.
Right. The trip also comes timely considering that the North is aiming to attempt to launch its spy satellite for the third time next month.
Exactly. So we'll see how that goes. In the past, under his father, Kim Jong-il, North Korea would usually have very long time after a failed launch in order to make sure that they got the next one right. And there were reports that scientists were punished. Under Kim Jong-un, he's much more willing to accept failure as the cost of success, in that there will be a second or third or more attempted launches even after a failure. In 2017, we saw 3 failed launches of an intermediate range ballistic missile, and then followed by 3 more successful launches that year.
Right. And in an interview over the weekend, South Korean leader President Yoon Suk-yeol, he said the military cooperation between North Korea and Moscow is illegal and unjust, and the international community will unite more tightly against it. Now, does that mean that there'll be more sanctions on the regime in Moscow? I mean, what other options other than sanctions are there?
Well, under existing UN resolutions, the military cooperation in the sense of transfer of military technology or weapons is prohibited, both going from North Korea to the outside world and then in reverse. So any kind of military technology or weapons or equipment provided one way or the other, including the artillery ammunition from North Korea to Russia, is a violation of numerous resolutions. That said, Moscow and Beijing would likely block any additional new resolutions or new sanctions. However, there's a lot of authority under existing UN resolutions as well as international and U.S. law that could enable additional sanctions against individual entities of not only North Korea and Russia, but Chinese banks and businesses that have been facilitating North Korea's prohibited nuclear and missile program. So perhaps not additional authorities, but additional actions under existing authorities.
Sure. In the meantime, China appears to be not too enthusiastic about this Kim Jong-un, Vladimir Putin summit, considering they haven't really reported much on that summit, right? Now, but with Hangzhou Asian Games taking place soon, how likely is it that Kim Jong-un will visit China and sit down for talks with Xi Jinping?
Well, it's really a matter of when. I think it's very likely that there will be another North Korea-China summit, but perhaps not in the immediate future. North Korea has a history of playing China and Russia, or previously the Soviet Union, off against each other. Now he seems to be focusing more on Russia to see what benefits he can get, military, economic, et cetera, from Russia. So I think the emphasis for a while will be with Russia, but eventually Kim will come back to China because China is responsible for over 90% of North Korea's foreign trade. So I think in the near term, the emphasis will be on Russia, but then it will have to come back to China for economic reasons.
Sure. Let's see how that trio manages their partnership. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. You have a good evening.
Well, thank you for having me.
The Gaya tumuli of Korea's ancient Gaya Confederacy have become South Korea's 16th site inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List. The addition came in recognition of the site's archaeological significance. Sin Se-byuk has more.
The Gaya tumuli, a cluster of 7 tombs from Korea's ancient Gaya Confederacy, was inscribed on UNESCO's World Heritage Site list on Sunday. The decision was made during the 45th session of the World Heritage Committee held in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Gaya was a confederation that prospered between the 1st and 6th centuries in the southern and central regions of the Korean peninsula. The inscription comes after a decade-long effort which began when the burial mounds were put on a tentative list in 2013. In May this year, the tumuli were recommended for inclusion on the UNESCO World Heritage List by the International Council on Monuments and Sites, an advisory organization under UNESCO. The Cultural Heritage Administration said the latest edition recognizes the tumuli's outstanding universal value.
The Gaya tumuli show the diversity of ancient civilizations in East Asia. They serve as evidence that neighboring countries could maintain horizontal relationships while maintaining autonomy.
The cone-shaped burial mounds, which extend across the hills of Goryeo in Gyeongsangnam province, include burial accessories and items showing the Confederation's network of trade as well as shared cultural commonalities. With the latest inscription, Korea now has 16 sites on the UNESCO World Heritage List. The Cultural Heritage Administration plans to pursue a UNESCO World Heritage listing for landmarks such as the capital fortification of Hanyang in Seoul. Sin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
BTS member Suga is set to begin his mandatory military service this week, becoming the third member of the group to do so. According to his agency Big Hit Music on Sunday, the 30-year-old star will fulfill his military duty by doing an alternative service beginning Friday. Now, this comes as Suga was ruled unfit for regular combat duty. In Korea, all able-bodied men must serve in the military. However, those with health issues may be assigned to alternative services, including working at a municipal government office. While his health issue has not been disclosed, it's believed that it's related to shoulder surgery he had in 2020. South Korea and countries in Africa have come a long way in tightening their economic partnerships and are looking to strengthen those relationships even further. Our business correspondent Yang spoke with the president of the African Development Bank.
The passion and commitment for economic ties between South Korea and Africa couldn't be halted by the COVID-19 pandemic. That's what President Akinwumi Adesina of the African Development Bank said during an interview at the Korea-Africa Economic Cooperation Ministerial Conference, a biennial event held for the first time in 5 years due to the pandemic.
The Korean government has subsequently supported us in the replenishment of the African Development Fund, which is a concessional financing window of the bank, and the Korean government provided us $108 million, and that is the highest they've ever given since they joined the fund in 1980.
Feed Africa being a part of the bank's agenda known as the High Fives, President Adesina has been emphasizing Africa's food self-sufficiency. Africa has 65% of the world's remaining uncultivated arable land that will have the potential to feed up to 9 billion people worldwide by 2050, meaning what Africa does with agriculture will determine the future of food around the globe. South Korea is supporting this by sharing its rice production technology with its counterparts in Africa.
And I'm very excited about the Korean Rice Belt initiative, in which the Korean government is providing high-yielding varieties, agronomic practices, and other types of technical support to 8 African countries to be able to produce rice. Africa imports about $6 billion of rice every year, so if we're able to produce a lot of rice, we can conserve foreign exchange and also make sure that we create a lot of jobs in rural areas.
The bank has also been putting efforts behind green growth for Africa. Along with adaptation to climate change and renewable energy generation, metals used in electric mobility have become crucial to go green, as Africa has vast amounts of the minerals and ores that are needed for batteries.
And I want to see companies from Korea investing in Africa, in lithium-ion battery manufacturing in Africa, but also making electric vehicles in Africa. And in fact, I want to tell you one thing that's quite exciting is that to manufacture lithium-ion batteries, precursor batteries in Africa is 3 times cheaper than manufacturing it in China or in the United States. So if there's a place to be, that's it.
Areas including energy transition and agriculture are expected to see further development at the next South Korea-Africa Summit.
Korea-Africa Energy Investment Framework, which is actually a co-financing facility that is providing $600 million of co-financing with the African Development Bank, will go a long way in helping us towards that. So I'm hoping that for the Korea-Africa Summit next year, we'll be able to show to the heads of state how we are scaling up together renewable energy in Africa.
To mobilize more resources for Africa's development, he is also hoping to work with South Korea regarding the reallocation of the special drawing rights to Africa that the IMF implemented worldwide in 2021. 신하영, 아리랑 뉴스, 부산.
Good morning, I'm Matthew Ashley, and we now turn over to stories from around the world. We begin in eastern Libya, where the death toll from last week's devastating floods in Derna has now reached at least 11,300 people. That's according to the United Nations on Sunday, which added that another 10,000 are still missing. The global organization cited figures from the Libyan Red Crescent, but the Red Crescent has disputed the numbers, saying it was shocked to have been mentioned in the latest report. Now, local officials have instead put the number of dead closer to 3,000. But the death toll is expected to continue rising as rescuers comb through debris. Now, the floods were triggered by heavy rains that caused 2 dams to collapse near the city of Derna. A quarter of the city is thought to have been wiped out. The military juntas controlling Mali, Niger and Burkina Faso have signed a joint security pact that promises mutual aid in case of any rebellion or external aggression. The 3 West Sahel nations formed the pact on Saturday in the Burkina Faso capital of Bamako. It establishes what is called the Alliance of Sahel States, which will see the partners lend economic aid and even military assistance if any one of them comes under attack. It comes as the neighbors continue to battle jihadism linked to Al-Qaeda and Islamic State. The signatories are also facing outside pressure over the toppling of their governments. All 3 countries have had coups since 2020, the most recent being Niger in July. In the Brazilian Amazon, 14 people have been killed in a plane crash. The crash occurred on Saturday in Barcelos province. The small private passenger aircraft had taken off from Manaus and was trying to land in Barcelos town amid rainy conditions. According to reports, 12 of those killed were passengers and 2 were crew members. All were Brazilian. The plane's operator, Manaus Aerotaxi, said that both aircraft and crew had met all safety requirements. An investigation into the cause of the crash has been launched. And finally, Oktoberfest officially started in Germany over the weekend. The 188th edition of the world's biggest beer festival began in Munich with the traditional opening of the first beer keg. This year, the festival is expected to draw in over 6 million visitors to the Bavarian capital over its 18-day period. And they're likely to drink a total of more than 2 million gallons of beer. The Bavarian Festival opens on the second to last Saturday in September and wraps up on the first Sunday of October. This year, it will end on October 3rd, when Germany also marks its reunification day. The festival got its start in 1810 to celebrate the marriage of the Crown Prince of Bavaria.
Good morning. The September heat wave continues with afternoon temperatures going 2 to 4 degrees higher than seasonal norms again. Daegu and nearby areas will see highs going up above 30 degrees Celsius this afternoon. Skies will remain sunny with a chance of passing rain. East of Gyeongsang-Bukdo province could see up to 60 millimeters of sudden showers. The rest of the country could see 5 to 40 millimeters of sudden rain. Mountainous regions could see rain turning into hail. And for now, the capital is forecast to stay dry under sunny skies all day today. It's a refreshing start to the day. Then highs in most parts will be similar to higher than Sunday. And especially those of you in Gyeongsang-do and surrounding regions, you will notice much warmer daytime highs this afternoon. Nationwide rain is in the forecast on Wednesday, which will drag down the morning temperatures to below 20 degrees in the capital. But afternoon highs will stay above norms for most of this week. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for Tuesday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.